Hi there, today I'm going to be showing you how you can set up UTM tracking in Marketo so that you can track web page visits from particular ad campaigns, set a person's first and latest touch attribution fields, and then track downstream conversions to sign up or contact sales forms. So this post will focus on tracking UTM parameters, but if you want to focus instead on how to track organic referral, social, or search visits within Marketo, and make sure they don't steal attribution from your paid campaigns, which is very important, then take a look at these two blog posts here, Marketo Anonymous Leads and Attribution, and a centralized Marketo attribution model. Take a look at these two posts to figure that stuff out. And also, as an extra bonus for you guys, in this video, I'm going to show you how you can automate your UTM tracking programs and their creation within Marketo. So stay tuned for that because that will save you guys a lot of time in the future. So the overview of a UTM tracking program in Marketo will look something like this. You'll have a campaign that tracks any visits to your website from a particular ad campaign. You'll have other campaigns then like the contacted and converted campaigns, which track any downstream conversions after that person visits your website from the ad campaign. And then finally, the anonymous smart campaign is explained in this Marketo Anonymous Leads and Attribution tracking post, and it won't be the focus of this video. So if you want to find out more about what purpose this serves, then check out that blog post. And the first thing to do when setting up your Marketo UTM tracking program is to create a default program type. And then you need to set the channel of this program type to your paid advertising or attribution channel. So to show you what this looks like in Marketo, we use two of them and they're basically the same. We have one for digital advertising where we have visited, converted, and contacted. And the converted and contacted are the success steps. And then we've also got a PPC, pay-per-click one, which is the exact same. We've got visited, converted, and contacted, and then we've got success steps here. So ignore the added to op. It's just basically another success step that we've added since I made the original blog post, but it's not too important for this video, so I'll ignore it. So then when we're looking at the setup of our program here in Marketo, we'll notice that it's a default program type and the channel is set to digital advertising. And then I'll show you these local program tokens because these are going to be used in the visit campaign, which I'll go through in a second. So we've got local program tokens to store the full query string from the ad campaign. We've got one that just stores the source parameter from the ad campaign, the medium parameter, and also the campaign parameter. And then we've got a lead source and lead source detail, which are just a bit user friendly. And I'll show you how we use these in the visit campaign in a second. So let's take a look at the visit campaign now. So the setup of the smart list of the visit campaign is pretty simple. We just have a visits web page trigger where the web page is set to any and the query string contains the query string that comes from the ad campaign. So when you're setting up your ad campaign in Google AdWords or AdSense, you have to make sure that any landing pages that this ad campaign links to have these UTM parameters appended so that when they visit these landing pages with these UTM parameters, we can match them to this program in Marketo. Then there's also this second visits web page trigger here, and this is just for redundancy. If anyone visits any of the landing pages on your site with this query string parameter, this first one should capture them. But just in case maybe something goes wrong, we also add this web pages any and the referrer contains these ad parameters. So this is just a bit of redundancy here. You don't need it. You can leave it out if you want. And then we take a look at the flow of the campaign here. We are going to mark their program status as visited. We are going to set their latest touch field to this my UTM local program token. And as I showed you before, this is just equal to the entire query string from the ad campaign. And just to show you what these ones look like quickly again, because we'll be looking at them in a second, we've got the source, medium, and campaign parameters stored in these tokens. And then we've got the lead source and lead source details stored in these tokens. So back to the flow now. We see that if the person source is empty and we haven't set their first touch attribution, that's what these fields store. The person source and lead source details store someone's first touch attribution. If this is empty, then we're going to overwrite their lead source detail first with the local program token. And then we are going to set the person source equal to the local program token as well for lead source. And then if the UTM source is empty and we haven't populated this first touch parameter yet, we're going to set that equal to the local program token. Same for the medium and same for the UTM campaign. And then if their acquisition program is empty, we're going to set their acquisition date to the system date and time. And then we are going to set the acquisition program equal to the name of this program. So that's how the visit campaign is set up to track web page visits to your site from this ad campaign. And now we'll take a look at how we can track downstream conversions from this campaign using this latest touch field, which we then reference in the contacted and converted smart campaigns. You might be wondering here why we are even using local program tokens and why we don't just set these values directly here in all these change data flow steps. I'll explain the reason why we're using local program tokens here later on in this video, but the basic reason is that it facilitates automation using the Marketo API. So that's why we're using local program tokens here instead of typing in the values directly. Okay, so now let's take a look at how we use this latest touch field in the contacted and converted campaigns. So whenever someone visits one of your web pages with the query string parameters from this ad campaign, we set their latest touch field equal to this value. So whenever someone does something with this latest touch field equal to this query string, we know that this paid campaign was the last thing they interacted with before they contacted sales or signed up for your online portal. So in this case, we can see that the person filled out the form, they chose the reason for contact as sales inquiry, and their latest touch was the latest touch corresponding to this ad campaign. So we mark them as contacted in this program. And then similarly in the converted campaign, whenever someone's MC user ID changes, we know they've signed up for our online portal. And when this happens at the same time that their latest touch field is equal to the latest touch value corresponding to this ad campaign, we know this ad campaign was the last thing they interacted with before they signed up for the portal. And so we set their status in this program to converted. So then later on, when we want to analyze the performance of this MS Teams Twitter campaign, we can come into this program, we can go to the program members tab, and we can see the number of people in the contacted, converted, and visited statuses to give us an idea of how effective this ad campaign has been. Okay, so now that we understand how our Marketo UTM tracking program is set up, let's take a look at how we can automate the creation of these programs every time our ad team wants to create a new ad campaign and have it tracked in Marketo. So going back to the blog post here, this is the section where we start talking about how to automate the creation of these UTM tracking programs. So what I'll show you in the rest of this video is how we can set up a Google form where our ad team can come in and tell us that they're creating a new ad campaign, and they can request UTM parameters for that ad campaign from us. Once they submit this Google form, then we will have our Zap run to take the inputs from the Google form and input them into a Google Sheet to create the UTM parameters that the ad team can use in their ad campaign. And then the Zap will create the UTM tracking program in Marketo and the smart campaigns specific to these newly created UTM parameters. And then finally, a Jira ticket will be cut for the marketing operations team to review the new UTM tracking program that was created and then activate the smart campaigns once they have been reviewed. All the code I'll go through in the rest of this blog and video is available in this directory here in GitHub. So you can download this code, modify it, and use it as you want. And then if it is your first time using the Marketo API, then I highly recommend taking a look at the Marketo API Quick Start Guide, which will introduce you to the Marketo API and show you how to make your first requests in Postman. If you are really serious about automating the creation of your UTM tracking programs in Marketo, then I highly recommend checking out Lesson 3 of the Marketo API crash course. It will walk you through how to make all the API requests from the Zapier workflow that I'll go through in the rest of this video, so that once you get a thorough understanding of what each API request is doing, you can then build your own UTM tracking automation workflow in Zapier. So just to show you what's covered in this lesson, you'll be shown in Postman how to make API requests to find and create folders, find and clone programs, update program tokens and costs, and then find, create, activate, deactivate, schedule, and delete smart campaigns. All of this stuff is involved in the Zapier automation workflow that I'm going to go through, and it's all covered in Lesson 3 of the Marketo API crash course. So if you're serious about implementing the workflow I'll show you in this video, then I highly recommend checking this out. Okay, so now let's dive into the setup of the automation workflow. So the first step in the whole process starts with the Google form. And when you click this link here, it's going to open up this PDF of the Google form. So we just ask for the add team member's email address, the campaign name that they're using, the destination URL of their landing page that's on your site. Then we ask whether it's an advertising or paid search platform. If they select advertising, then we show them all the advertising options we have and ask them to select which one it is. If it's a paid search platform, then we ask them which paid search platform it is. And then we also have a section for any additional notes here. So once this Google form gets submitted, it then creates a new row in this spreadsheet. So we can see here that the name of the campaign is entered, the destination URL, and then the platform they're using, and then the advertising platform in particular. So we see it's either paid search or advertising, and then we either get the advertising platform or the search platform in the Google Sheet. And the creation of this new row in this Google Sheet is what triggers our Zapier automation workflow to run. Okay, so now let's dive into Zapier to take a look at how the workflow is set up. So you'll notice that we're using the new or updated spreadsheet row action in here. And this is what causes the Zap to trigger when a new row is added to this spreadsheet after the Google form is submitted. And then ignore these next two steps here. They're not important. The next thing we are going to do is we've got this Google Sheet here called UTM Builder, which is responsible for creating the UTM parameters that our ad team will use for their ad campaign. And the way it works is that we give it the channel and the sub-channel and the campaign name, and then using Google Sheets formulas, it then creates the UTM parameters for us. So if you want to see how these Google Sheets formulas are set up, you can come into the sheet and take a look yourself, and then you can copy and paste them into your own sheet. So what we're going to do in the Zap now is we're going to look up the next row in this sheet, and then we are going to paste in all these values we got from the Google form into this sheet to get. So once we paste in all the values we got from the Google form in here, this cell will update with the query string parameters, and that's what we'll use in the rest of the Zap. And this is the value we'll give to the ad team. So the way this is done is we look up the next available row in the UTM builder sheet, and then we update this row with the campaign name, the platform, and then we either put in the advertising platform or the search platform. You'll notice that I have them both included here because only one of them will ever be populated. So if it's advertising, then the advertising platform will be populated. If it's a paid search campaign, then the search platform will be populated and this one won't. So that's why I'm using them both here. And then we put in the destination URL of the ad campaign, and that all gets pushed into this Google Sheet. And then the formula updates to create the UTM parameters, and then the tagged link that we'll provide to the ad team that they can use in their ad campaigns. One thing to note here is that when I first set this Zap up, if the paid ad team submitted a few different requests in quick succession, there were concurrency issues with the Zap where it would start overwriting the same row in the Google Sheet for each submission. So for the first submission, it would populate row 6, but then because the second submission came in so quickly, it would then overwrite row 6 again with the information from the second submission. So to avoid all these concurrency issues where a lot of submissions were occurring in short frequency, what I did was I had to set up a mapping between the next empty row in this UTM builder sheet with the next empty row in the UTM request form responses sheet. So when a new submission comes in here, it's going to go into row 6, then the next submission is going to go into row 7, and then the third submission is going to go into row 8. So in order to ensure that the first submission comes into the UTM builder in row number 6, and the second comes in row number 7, and the third comes in row number 8. This is the way the behavior should be automatically, but because of those concurrency issues, that's not what happened. So in order to ensure this is the way the sheet behaves, I've set up a mapping here where this empty row, next 6, corresponds to the first empty row in this sheet, then next 7 corresponds to the second empty row in this sheet, and then next 8 corresponds to the third empty row in this sheet. So all these next numbers here from 6 all the way to 33 correspond to the next free row numbers in this sheet. And doing this mapping fixed all those concurrency issues. So here in Zapier, we'll see that, sorry, no, ignore this step. We'll see that in this step here, where we're looking up the spreadsheet row in Google Sheets, what we're doing is we're looking up next and then the row ID that we got from this submission. So as I mentioned, the next time this sheet gets filled out, the values will be put in row ID number 6. So therefore, in the UTM builder sheet here, where we're looking up, we're going to look up the value next and then the row ID, which is number 6 in the UTM builder sheet, which is going to pull up this row ID, which just also happens to be 6. That's a coincidence. And then finally, we are going to update the row we found in step number 4 with all the values that were submitted to the Google form. So we put in the platform, put in Facebook, we put in the search platform, put in the destination URL, And once we put all this information in and we update it, then later on in this Zap, we can pull in the query string parameter and use this within our ad campaigns in Marketo. And then the next step in this Zap is that we are going to find the Jira information for the person from the paid ad team who submitted the ticket. So in this case, we see that it could be Spencer or Henry. It could be Spencer or Henry who submit the UTM request. So this step finds their Jira information so that we can include them on the Jira ticket that we create in step number 7. And once we create our Marketo UTM tracking program, we then update this Jira ticket with all the information and a link to the Marketo program. So it makes it very easy for the marketing operations team, once they see this Jira ticket on their board, to click the link to the Marketo program, to review it, activate all the smart campaigns, and then once they're happy with it, they can move that Jira ticket to their done column. So now we'll move on to the part of the Zap that deals with all the Marketo API requests. And the very first thing we do is we have to request our Marketo access token so that we can make all these subsequent API requests. And then step 10 just gets or creates the year folder. And what I mean by that is, I'll go to a better example here. So it gets the year folder or creates a new one. So since we are in the middle of April 2023, we already have a year folder created for this year. However, if this Zap were to run in January 2024 for the first time, then there would not be a 2024 paid campaigns folder. So the Zap would create a 2024 paid campaigns folder. So that's what step number 10 does here. It either gets the current years folder or it creates a new one. And then similarly, step number 11 will either get the current months folder, or if it's the first time this Zap is running in May of 2023, then it will create the 2023-05 campaigns folder. So that's what step number 11 does here. It either gets or creates the latest month folder. And then in step number 12 here, we are going to get all the latest UTM tracking programs in between a certain date range. And here in this action, I use the date range of 1 year ago. However, depending on how many UTM tracking programs you have, you might need to make this date range shorter. And the reason for this is that the output of the Marketo API request to look up programs between a certain date range is limited to the number of programs it can return. So let's say this number is 200. It can only return 200 programs. Then if you have 200 programs in the last 90 days, then you'll have to limit your time window to 90 days. However, if you only have 50 programs in the last 5 years, then you can set your time range to obviously 5 years. So that's what this request here does. And the reason we're pulling in all these latest UTM tracking programs between this time frame, let's say in the last year, is that we want to find the latest version of the UTM tracking program that matches the one we want to create. So if the submission was an advertising Facebook campaign, we want to find the latest UTM tracking program, which is also for Facebook. Or if it's Google, we want to find the latest program in the past year, which was for Google. Or if it's for Quora, obviously, we want to find the latest program from the past year, which was created for Quora. And the reason we're looking for the latest program is because it's the most likely to be up to date and be correct. Because since we're cloning this program in the next step, we want to make sure we're cloning the most accurate and most up-to-date program for the ad platform we desire. So that's what this step here does in step number 12. And then once we've found the latest UTM tracking program corresponding to our ad platform or search platform, then we clone this program in step number 13. And even though step number 13 returns the ID of the newly cloned program, I had issues in the past where Marketo would not tell Zapier in time whether it had cloned the program successfully, and Zapier has a 10-second timeout limit on all its actions. So Marketo would clone the program successfully, but it wouldn't tell Zapier within 10 seconds. So Zapier would mark this action as failed, and then all the rest of these actions, which depended on this clone program action, would subsequently fail because they relied on it. However, when I went into Marketo, I could see that the program was successfully cloned. So what I did instead was I built in this redundancy step in step number 14 to get the new program ID of this program that was just cloned. So now all these subsequent steps depend on step number 14. They get the program ID from step number 14 instead of step number 13. So even if step number 13 is marked as failed by Zapier, which it won't be, it's just a timeout issue, step number 14 will go into Marketo and get the program ID of this new program we just created, and then the rest of the steps will use the ID from 14. So I just had to build that redundancy in because of that timeout issue that was occurring. So once we have the newly cloned program ID in step number 14, we are then going to update the local program tokens that I showed you earlier on. And this is where I can finally explain in detail why we use local program tokens in our visit campaign. So as I mentioned earlier on, I'll just move my head here for a second. As I mentioned earlier on, you were probably wondering, hey Tyron, why don't we just manually type in the desired values here instead of using local program tokens? And I said the reason for this was because it facilitates updating of the Smart Campaign via API. When you're using the Marketo API, it is not possible to update flow steps with the API. So if we created a new UTM tracking program and we wanted to change all these attribution values within the flow here, we wouldn't be able to do that directly. So the hacky way of doing it and the workaround is we use local program tokens in these change data value flow steps. And then using the API, we are able to update the value of all these local program tokens for our new UTM tracking program. So that's the workaround we had to put in place here, and that's why we use local program tokens in the change data value flow steps, because it allows us to update the attribution values that someone is being assigned using the API. And in case you need a refresher of all of this, I explain that here in this blog post. I explain that here in the Marketo UTM tracking section. Just underneath the image of the triggers here, I write this all out. So then, going back to Zapier, what step 15 does is it takes all these parameters, like the channel, sub-channel, UTM source, medium, and campaign. It takes all these values and then it updates these local program tokens with these values from the Google Sheet. Then in step 16, we get all the Smart Campaign IDs of the 3 Smart Campaigns that exist underneath this program. We give Marketo the program ID, and then it gives us back all these smart campaigns. And then in step number 17, we update the smart campaign description with the query string of the ad campaign that we're tracking. And the reason we do this is that it makes it very easy when the marketing operations team comes along to just copy and paste this value and to paste it into the latest touch field here. Because unfortunately, again, via Marketo API, it is not possible to update filters in the smart list via API. So let's go with the example where we cloned a previous Twitter campaign to create this new one. When we do that and we first come into this contacted smart campaign, the latest touch field here will be containing the query string from the previous Twitter campaign. So the marketing operations team has to manually come in and copy this value for the new Twitter ad campaign and paste it in here for the tracking to work successfully. And then they have to do the exact same in the converted campaign. But we make this very easy for the marketing operations team because they just have to come into the description, copy this value, and then paste it into the latest touch field here as well. And then similarly for the visit campaign, they just come in here and they paste the new query string into the query string constraint here and the referrer constraint over here. You might also be asking the question, well, we could use local program tokens when we were updating the change data value flow steps here. Why can't we use local program tokens in here, here, and here? And the reason for that is unfortunately, we cannot use local program tokens in these smart list filters. So we are unable to do that. Good question though. So once the marketing operations team has come in and updated all these values, they will then activate all these smart campaigns, and then they will come in here and set the Salesforce campaign sync to sync all these campaign members to Salesforce campaigns, or to sync all these Marketo program members to Salesforce campaigns. I'm in marketing operations, so that's why I like to make things as easy as possible for myself and my team. And as I mentioned before, one way we do this is by creating a Jira ticket on the marketing operations team's Jira board. And in step number 7 here, you can see that we pull in variables, like we pull in the row ID number here so that each ticket will have a different number in the summary. And we pull in the desired date that the UTM request needs to be completed by. And then we pull in information like the campaign name, the landing page URL, what search or advertising platform it is, and the email of the person who requested the campaign. And then we can include other information here as well. And we can also include links to the Google Sheets like the UTM builder or the UTM request form responses sheet to make it even easier for the marketing operations team. And we could have moved this create issue in Jira Software Cloud action here to the very end of our Zap and then update the description with a link to the Marketo program we created in step number 14. However, the issue with that is if there is some error with your automation and these steps fail, and you do have a link within this final, if all these automation steps fail and you've got this action to create the issue at the end of your Zap and it's pulling in the ID from step number 14, then this action to create the Jira ticket will fail because it depends on the failed step number 14. So then the Jira ticket never gets created and your team doesn't know about it. So that's why I prefer to have the creation of the Jira ticket before any of the stuff that's likely to fail, because if this stuff does fail, then at least we have the Jira ticket created and the MOPS team or the marketing operations team know about it. But what you can do is in step number 19 here, this is mainly to move the Jira ticket into the to-do column of the marketing operations team's board, but you can also update the description of the ticket here. So instead of setting the description in step number 7 here, we can actually take all this information and set it in step number 19, because if we update the description here, it will overwrite what we created in step number 7 above. So we can take all that information that we put in step 7 and put it down here instead. And since we now know that these steps executed successfully since we made it to this point in the Zap, we can actually pull in the link to the Marketo program. So here, one of the outputs of this step is actually a link to the Marketo program. So then we can pull this in and put it within the Jira ticket here. So then it's very easy for the marketing operations team. When they see this ticket on their board, they can get all the information about the UTM request, and then they can just follow the link to the Marketo program that's in here to do all the reviews I mentioned earlier on. So that's how you can set up UTM tracking programs and smart campaigns in Marketo, and how you can also automate the entire process around how they are created when your ad team makes a request. And as I mentioned before, if you're serious about implementing this automation yourself, I highly recommend taking a look at lesson number 3 in the Marketo API crash course. And at the end of this video, I'll actually put a sneak peek preview of this course in the YouTube end screen, so you should check that out. Have a great day.